Okay. I don't know what my hair is in. Well, hello! Welcome back to my channel. Just Shauna here to talk about some friggin' books. This is kind of a combo recent wrap-up slash Mermaidathon wrap-up because most of the books I read recently were the books that I read for the Mermaidathon. So, refresh. I will go through which book was for which challenge as well. I completed 2 books, technically. There were 2 graphic novels that I also completed, but I'm talking about those in a different wrap-up later. So, and they didn't help with any of the challenges necessarily anyway, so whatever. The first book that I completed for Mermaidathon was Salt to the Sea by Ruta Sepetys, and I mostly, about half, I would say, I listened to it on audio, and then the rest of it I read. The end of it, the final 150 pages or so, I read the physical copy just because it's a very quick read. I was surprised because it's really thick. I didn't realize though that it's the chapters, it's 4 different characters, and so each chapter is from one of the characters' perspectives, and they're 2-3 pages long. That's one chapter. You know what I'm saying? So the pacing, that's one. The pacing is really quick because of that. As a refresh, this is YA historical fiction about one of the world's, or the world's greatest, I think, maritime disaster, which was, the name of it, Wilhelm Gustloff. I'm probably saying that incorrectly, but that was the name of the ship that, people died. And this was during World War II, the end of World War II, and our characters here are made up people, of course, but this was a real thing that happened. And I got a little emotional in one part, but the rest of it I didn't get super emotional. All 4 characters they end up crossing paths at one point or another. And while like I said, the pacing was pretty quick, and I feel like I got to know the characters a fair amount, but it did still feel a little rushed because of the very quick pacing. But yeah, they were still very full characters. Alfred can choke. He's a dick. Oh man. This guy was the absolute worst. It made my skin crawl. Super tragic, tragic as fuck piece of history, but I'm glad I know about it now, and I'm glad I read this book. I'm probably not gonna keep it necessarily, because I don't know if I'll ever read it again, but I recommend it. It was good. On my 1 to 10, I gave it a 6.83, which translates to 3.5 pushinicorns. I feel like that's sacrilege, because almost everybody that reads this is 5 stars, 4 stars. It was good. There were things about it that didn't exactly connect with me. This fulfilled the challenge of Atlantis, reading a book with an ocean on the cover, and there it is, and it's on the back too. And then also the challenge of Turtle Reef, which was to read a book that you're reluctant to read or is intimidating, and I just thought this was going to be a lot more emotionally impactful for me. And also Aguina Amor, which was to read a book with romance. I ended up counting this because there was a little bit of a romance happening. So it's not a romance book. It's a little bit of a cheat, but whatever. My neighbor is playing with her child outside, right there. Okay, are you going back in? The next book that I completed for Mermaidathon was the only other book that I technically completed for Mermaidathon, and that was Frostfire by Amanda Hocking. This fit the buddy read challenge. I buddy read this with Nicole from Who Picked This Book, and it also fit the Magic Island, reading a fantasy book, and the Arctica Kingdom challenge of reading a book based in winter. And this was it's YA, urban fantasy, essentially. It's trolls. It's tribes of trolls, but they look like humans, but they have different powers and abilities than humans do, and they live, essentially all of them are in Canada, hidden in their kingdoms, and it's magicked, so humans can't see their castles and cities and whatever. And the premise here is there are people called trackers, or trolls called trackers, and they do this thing where they use changelings, the troll tribes do. So they will take their troll babies and replace them with human babies, and they'll take the human babies and like put them up for adoption, essentially. They'll take them to orphanages and whatnot. And basically just for money, like, so they put them with like wealthy families. So when they come of age, they can get their like trust fund and then go back to the like troll kingdoms. It was very weird. I was like, okay, sure, what? And yeah, the trackers though, they are tasked with, when it's time to bring these changelings back, they're the ones that go get them and bring them back. Our main character, Bryn, she sees a revered warrior try to kill her father, nobody knows why, and then he dips. And then years later, he's back, and it appears that he is trying to kill changelings before they come back. And they're royalty. These changelings are royalty. So it's the whole big, oh my God, why is he doing this? Blah, blah, let's get him thing. So this was an easy read. It was a very quick read because of the writing style. But I couldn't really get connected to any of the characters. Bryn, our main character, I don't even know if that's how you pronounce it, but she was a jackass. Like, she was just not a good person. There was one part where one of her best friends, well, this is spoilers, whatever. There was something going on in one of her best friends' lives that she should have been very like, yay, congratulations, happy for you. And instead, she acted like a petulant child and was like, meh, why are you doing this to me? I can't even believe you. And like, was a jerk. And I was just like, and then it was all like, oh, I'm so sorry. I was just so emotional about my own things going on. I'm like, no, I don't like this. That's not okay. I have shit going on in my life all the time, and so do my best friends, and we don't talk to each other like that. Like, if something good is happening in their life, I'm gonna be happy for them, even if my life is like in tumult or whatever. Like, I'm not gonna be like, well, I'm just mad about my own shit, so fuck you. No, what? I was already kind of like annoyed with her, but she was like, whatever. And then it got to that part, and I was just like, nah, girl. And I just didn't get connected to any of the characters. And then this book, okay, it's part of a trilogy. The ending, nothing is resolved. There are so many different like subplots and this, and oh, now there's a new mystery and we don't know anything. And then it just ends on an absolute cliffhanger, but with literally nothing in the book resolved. And I can't stand that. I don't mind a good cliffhanger. You know, ooh, we have the climax, things happen, we get some of these things resolved, da-da-da-da, it's fizzling out, and then the ending, you're like, oh crap, like something else. I like that. I fully enjoy a good cliffhanger. But not when the climax of the book is at the very end, and then you just like dip out in the middle of it. So I'm not going to continue, even though I had the second book also. And yeah, it was just, it wasn't great. On my 1 to 10, I gave this a 4.6, which translates to 2.5 Pushinicorns, which on my rating is aggressively eh. So those two books completed all of the challenges except for one, which was the group buddy read, which was The Oyster Thief by Sonia Faruqi. I got to page 76. I even put a little thing in it because there was some dialogue that happened that just put me over my limit with this one. This is a mermaid, and she's about to get married, and then there's a human man who works for this corporation that's basically destroying the oceans, and things ensue, and they end up together at some point. It's in the synopsis, and they go on this adventure, whatever. So the book is in their two perspectives. So like different chapters are about her, and then there's another chapter that's from his perspective. First of all, the dude, Izar, I hated him from the get-go. It's one of those things where I'm sure, obviously, he changes and grows as the book goes on, because I don't know how he couldn't, because I don't know how he could be a main love interest if he remains the way that he was for the part that I read. So I'm sure he grows and he changes, but I said it in my vlog, he had this thing, his whole motivation, he wanted to like do it right in like the second chapter. He's talking about how he wants to like annihilate all the mer people. He just wants them all dead. Every single mer person, right? Because mer people killed his parents. And I just cannot with that type of a motivation. I understand that that's realistic because there are people who think that way and are like, one Muslim did XYZ, so fuck them all, or, you know, whatever, if it's race or gender or religion or whatever. One person from this group did something bad to me, my family, or just to the world in general, so now I hate all of them. That type of like xenophobia type shit, I can't. I understand that it's realistic. There are people in the real world who think like that and who behave that way, but they're jackasses. And I don't really want to read about a main character who is like that and then he changes later. I'm just like, eh. And right off the bat too, there was a character that was like his boss slash father figure that I was like, I need to look up the synopsis because I'm fairly certain I know that there's a big lie, and I'm sure at some point our main character figures out the big lie. I'm pretty sure I figured it out right off the bat, and I just didn't like any of it. It just was it felt very contrived, and whatever. And then down in Mermaid Land, our main character there, she was fine. Like, she was fine. The dialogue, though, just wasn't great, and like every single female in her life, she hated or they hated her. She couldn't get along with anybody. Her mom was a jerk. Her boss was a jerk. All the little mermaid girls around hated her because she was dating and engaged to the fanciest heir of all Mermaid Land. Whatever. Her like future mother-in-law hated her and thought she wasn't good enough for her son. And her best friend had a daughter, and that's who they wanted. Like, they wanted the son to be with this other girl. The dialogue, guys, let me get to it. So this is the mother, the future mother-in-law speaking, and she's with her best friend, okay? Your family will never be good enough for ours. Epaulette snapped. Her gaze turned to Coraline. You will never be good enough for my son. There are still 2 weeks left to the wedding. There's still time for Eklund to come to his senses and choose Rosette over you. Yes, it is my daughter who deserves him, Violacia said. If I have my way, Epaulette continued, this garden will be as close as you and your family ever get to my mansion. And it's just a personal thing. When dialogue does not work for me, it makes the book not really work for me. It just feels so contrived and like this evil villain, like, and I keep saying I just, but like I don't have words for how annoyed I was. So I DNF'd it. I was like, I'm not gonna do this anymore. And then I actually read these 2 other books before the Mermaidathon, but whatever. I'm gonna talk about them now. So this one was a reread, and that is The Demon King by Cinda Williams-Chima. I read this years ago. God, when did I read this? I don't even know. I love this series, and it had been so long since I read it, but I just was like, I remember that I loved it. I remember that I loved it. And then I reread it, and I listened to it on audio, and Raissa, I love Raissa. I forgot how much I love Raissa Anna Mariana. That's her full name, I believe. So it's YA. I would call it high fantasy, but YA fantasy at any rate. A queendom. It's the line of the queens. It's the female line that rules, and our main character, Raissa, is the princess heir. So she's the heir to this queendom. Our other main character is Han Alistair, who he is a retired street lord, basically. And he has a connection with this tribal clan. He just always spends his summers there. His best friend is in one of the clans, and Raissa's father is from a different clan, but so she has spent time with the clans as well, and their stories coincide at one point, and there's this whole uproar, a kind of, I don't want to say rebellion happening, but there's intrigue and backstabbing and treason and all these things happening. So yeah, I love Raissa because she is a, YA tough girl, okay? But she's not necessarily a warrior, and she is so intelligent and just wants to be a great leader for her queendom and wants to learn how to be a better ruler, and she is a little critical of her mother, who's the current queen, because she sees the things that her mother is doing wrong and incorrectly. And she's just very thoughtful as well. It was a very enjoyable reread for sure. I ended up getting Audible again just to get this on audio because it's not available at the library or on Hoopla. I couldn't find it. I don't know. Maybe it's on Scribd, but whatever. I got it on Audible. On this reread, I rated this an 8.6 on my 1 to 10 scale, which translates to 4.5 pushinicorns. Very high. So then the next book I read after The Demon King was The Everlasting Rose by Donielle Clayton. This is book 2 of the Bells series. And the Bells, I feel like, got pretty mixed reviews. I enjoyed it. It's a world where these girls who are known as the Bells have powers of beauty. Everyone is born into this world gray and like colorless. And the Bells have basically magical abilities to make people beautiful. So they are a hot commodity, and there is a favorite who works for the queen and her court. And in the first book, our main character, Camille, is selected to be the favorite, and then she sees the dark underbelly of their world up close and personal. The writing style is, I enjoy it, and the descriptions are very ethereal and beautiful and magical, and I can see they have teacup animals, which I just die. But then it gets real dark real fast. There's torture and just very bad things happening. So I don't want to say too much about the plot of this one because it'll give away stuff that happens in the first book. But yeah, adventures continue. Camille is on an adventure. That's all I will say. The plot here did feel a little bit meandering. She is kind of like on a quest, so that's probably why, because it's like, let's go here, we got to figure out how to get there, and then once we're there, we got to figure out how to do this and hide and whatever. So it was a little bit meandering, but it all came together in the end for me, and it left me generally satisfied. On my 1 to 10, I gave this a 6.6, which translates to 3.5 pushinicorns. So better than average, better than middle of the road. And there we have it. Those are the books I'm talking about for today. I feel like this is gonna be a little longer than I wanted, but you know, whatever, it's fine. As always, thank you so much for your time. Hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.